65% of ordinary people will press a button they believe delivers a lethal 450-volt shock to a stranger simply because a man in a grey lab coat standing calmly beside them says one sentence. Please continue. Not soldiers. Not sociopaths. Not anyone screened for cruelty. Just people who answered a newspaper ad for $4 and an afternoon. Before you decide what kind of person could do that, understand what the experts believed would happen. The man running this study asked psychiatrists at Yale to predict the outcome. He asked colleagues. He asked graduate students. The consensus was almost total. Only a tiny fraction of people, less than 3 in 100, would ever go all the way to the maximum voltage. The prediction rested on something comforting, something you probably still believe about yourself right now. That cruelty requires a cruel person and that ordinary decency has a ceiling nobody sane exceeds. Everyone agreed. Everyone was wrong. Here is what actually happened inside that room. You are the teacher. Behind a wall, a man you've just met, pleasant, mid-50s, mentions a heart condition, is the learner. You cannot see him. You can only hear him. Your job is simple. Read word pairs, and every time he answers wrong, press the next switch on a shock generator. The switches are labelled in neat ascending increments, 15 volts, then 30, then 45, climbing all the way up to 450 where the label simply reads X and X. At 75 volts, you hear him grunt. At 120, he shouts that the shocks are painful. At 150, he demands to be let out, says his heart is bothering him. At 300 volts, he pounds on the wall and stops answering entirely. And beside you, the entire time stands the man in the lab coat. Not threatening you, not raising his voice, just repeating one of 4 fixed phrases whenever you hesitate. Please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You have no other choice. You must go on. You are not watching a monster in that chair. You are watching people sweat through their shirts. Stammer. Laugh. A short, involuntary, horrified laugh. And then apologize for laughing. Argue with the man in the coat while their hand is still moving toward the switch. One participant asked, 4 separate times, who is responsible if something happens to him? And when he was told the experimenter would take full responsibility, he sat back down and kept going. 65% of people pressed every switch, all the way to 450 volts, believing, genuinely believing, they might be killing someone. And here's the detail that should stop you cold. Not one of them believed going in that they were the kind of person who would do this. But that was not the strangest part. Subscribe if you'd rather recognize this mechanism in yourself before a man in any kind of coat ever asks you to test it. The strangest part is how ordinary it felt from the inside. Nobody in that chair experienced themselves as evil. They experienced themselves as compliant, as instruments carrying out a procedure designed by someone with more authority than them. This is the mechanism, and it has a name: the agentic state. It is the psychological shift from experiencing yourself as the author of your actions to experiencing yourself as the conduit for someone else's will. The moment that shift occurs, moral responsibility doesn't disappear. It relocates. It travels upward to whoever gave the order, and the person actually pulling the lever feels quite sincerely like they didn't do it. They were just following the chain. Diffusion of responsibility is only half the architecture. The other half is incremental commitment, and it's the more elegant trick. Nobody was ever asked to jump from 0 volts to lethal. They were asked to go from 15 to 30, then 30 to 45. Every single step was only marginally worse than the one before it, which meant there was never one clear moment that felt like the line. Never a single instant where stopping felt obviously, urgently necessary. By the time the shocks were unbearable, the person administering them had already invested dozens of smaller compliances, and reversing course meant admitting that everything up to this point had been a mistake. It is far easier psychologically to take one more step than to be the one who stops and says the last 19 steps were wrong. None of this is a personal defect. It is closer to an evolved shortcut. Deference to legitimate authority kept small human groups alive for a very long time, because coordinated action under a trusted leader beat individual improvisation more often than not. You're not broken for having this wiring. You are running the same chain of command software found in every soldier who follows an order he privately opposes, every employee who executes a directive he thinks is a mistake. Every institution where nobody at any single rung feels like the one who decided anything. You felt this exact mechanism outside a laboratory, almost certainly this week. You followed an instruction from a manager you privately thought was wrong, and finished it anyway because refusing felt like a bigger event than complying. You've sat in a meeting and stayed quiet on an idea you disagreed with because someone with more seniority spoke first and set the frame, and disagreeing now would mean contradicting them, not just the idea. You've kept following a process you know is broken, a form, a script, a policy, because that's the procedure, and no one at your level has the standing to say otherwise. And you've likely started some uncomfortable task, realized halfway through that it was wrong, and finished it anyway, because stopping in the middle felt more socially costly, more awkward, more like an admission than simply seeing it through to the end. The cost of this doesn't arrive as a single dramatic failure. It arrives quietly, as a gap between the person you describe yourself as at dinner, principled, someone who'd speak up, someone who'd never just follow along, and the person who, under mild pressure from someone in a position of authority, does exactly what they're told. That gap doesn't announce itself. It just accumulates decision by decision until responsibility for outcomes in your own life has been so thoroughly distributed upward and sideways that no one, including you, quite owns any of it. Careers get built this way, so do marriages, so do entire departments where every person can honestly say, "I was just doing what I was told," and somehow the sentence is still true when 40 people say it in sequence. Here is the observation, and it is not rhetorical. You have been listening to a single, calm, authoritative voice for several minutes, laying out a structure, telling you what happened, what it means, and in what order to understand it. You didn't interrupt. You didn't pause to check the numbers. You kept going, past at least one moment where you could have stopped, because stopping in the middle would have felt, in some small and almost imperceptible way, like the wrong thing to do. The voice never once identified itself. You deferred anyway. Notice that.